Hello, my name is Grace Ragland, and with me today is Kate Barton and Matt Polk. Welcome to our podcast, and thanks for listening today. The topic that we would like to focus on is the correlation between reducing food waste, family planning, and their joint effect on the current and future climate crisis.
The first point I would like to make would be to address the part that the government has had to play both in the U.S. and globally. Personally, I feel like the older generation has largely gotten in the way of attempts of activism and have made it harder for up-and-coming activists and families to begin on future work.
I agree with that. We hear a lot about the problems with emissions and occasionally the inequity involved with climate change, but I feel that the government hasn't done what they need to for this crisis. Specifically, the mass amount of food waste happening in the U.S., which also hasn't even been significantly talked about in the media. I have the statistics here that say on average 4.4 gigatons of CO2 are emitted due to food waste, and just about 70.6 gigatons could be prevented from being emitted if we focus on the reduction of food waste.
I genuinely didn't know that. I know about the emissions as a result of things like cattle farming, and obviously there are some emissions from production, but that was way more than I thought food waste could contribute in gigatons. It's sad to see that the government hasn't made any changes based on what's happening.
Honestly, I think that if families were simply being more mindful of how much they were wasting, then this wouldn't be as much of an issue. According to the EPA, every year the average family of four wastes $1,500 on food, and 81% of that waste ends up in landfills. Literally, a third of food produced in the U.S. does not make it onto a plate. I can't help but think that if families were smaller, especially in this overpopulated world, it would not be as much of a problem. But I do know that it's not realistic for all families and communities.
Oh yeah, totally. And I don't think it's moral to enforce something like a child or birth policy. However, education and access to family planning facilities can play a very major role in changing the future when thinking about climate change. If I'm going to be critical, I'd say that the fewer people there are, the less pollution there is.
Families are major contributors, but who I mostly blame are large corporations like retail stores. Seriously, they waste about 16 billion pounds of food each year.
Oh damn. Do you know if they're held accountable for that at all? I mean, I know corporations that directly emit are monitored, but are those stores?
Well, what I could find was a rating system based by the Center of Biological Diversity, which scores different grocery store chains based on accountability, prevention, and recycling. Surprisingly enough, Walmart actually holds themselves accountable for their food waste and are rated at the top, having an overall B rating of reducing food waste. On the other hand, Target, Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, and Costco hold a D rating.
I've actually never been in a Walmart before.
Bro.
Anyway, I'm kind of not surprised that businesses like Costco and Target have such a low rating. Costco being as huge as it is, and because they deal in bulk foods, a little of their product being tossed is actually relatively a lot of product. And Target appears to focus on their on-site image over practicality.
I think that we also have to consider that businesses benefit so much from the way that they operate that they aren't very likely to be changing the ways that kind of falls on citizens. I think that the way for already existing large families to help reduce their food waste would be a pretty easy solution of personal gardening and food compost. Gardening at home removes so much CO2. Also, if people were to compost and recycle the right way instead of putting everything in the garbage, that would help immensely.
Grace, I kind of want to talk more about what you said about production emissions. Things like the harvesting and transportation of grocery produce and the amount of plastic and chemicals used to package and refrigerate those items contributes so much to carbon dioxide emissions. Cutting those things out by making your own garden or participating in a community one would provide more benefits than we can count. Plus, they're just mini carbon sinks.
Especially with the summer coming around, people can start planting and focusing on a more eco-friendly lifestyle.
I'm so sorry to end this short, but we're suddenly running out of time. I suppose my last thoughts would be if companies refuse to do anything, then people have to step up and take matters into their own hands by working as a community, by slowly changing high consumption lifestyles. Kate, Matt, any last thoughts?
I think you summed it up great, Grace. It's been excellent to be able to chat with you both on this issue.
No, nothing from me either. Thanks for listening.